Okay, welcome back. We have our oval for the basic shape of the face. We have our midline drawn. I've got it drawn very lightly so that I can erase it, but it's halfway between the chin and the top of the skull. Uh, and so we're going to start getting the placement of our eye. Now, if you look at this face, this picture of the rock, if we put this here right down the middle, you will see that the eye is basically in the center of its side of the face. Now, with his, it's maybe a little bit toward the center. The thing you've got to remember is that there is about an eye's width. So if you measure, do a fingertip measure of the eye, you'll see that there's about an eye's width between uh, the two eyes. So if you measure, do a fingertip measure on your model, on your photo or your live model, maybe not going up to their face, but just from a distance, measure that you've got an eye's width between them, between their two eyes, then you'll be able to get everything else to balance. So, but if we look at this side of the face, we're going to put a dot just about in the middle. We might move, if this is the middle, we might move over just a smidge and put our dot there. And I'm going to be drawing a little bit darker just to make sure it shows up on camera. Normally, I keep everything super light until I have everything in place. And then I start going in darker. But it's best to go very, very light until you know you've got everything where it needs to go and you're ready to start firming up details, because a pencil line that is very light is so much easier to erase. So I have my two dots, and with all the little dots, to me, this looks like a little robot face now. But we're going to start working on adding some more details. You can get about 4 to 5 eye widths across a face. So if I use this and mark the width of his eye, and then I use that to measure across his face, we get 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're just a little bit shy of that. So, and that's the case for most people. You get somewhere between 4 to sometimes 5, but we're doing just an average face. So we're going to use the fourth. And if you look, we've already divided the face into 4 equal portions. So we can take this space right here and measure that, make dots showing what that distance from the midline to the dot we made, then center that up over our eye and know how wide our eye should be. And so I'm going to transfer those dots onto my drawing. Center it up again, make dots, and there is our dimensions. Now I'm going to draw the eye shape, and for most people it's a kind of a football shape, not a perfect football. Usually the upper lid is more football-like, and if you, once again, let's look at the rock. That upper part of his eye is definitely like a half of a football shape, but the lower part, sometimes it's because of the way the cheekbones are pushing up, especially if a person is smiling. It'll raise the cheekbones up, or not the bones, but the apples of the cheek up and put pressure on the eyelids, and it kind of makes it appear flatter. As you can see in this picture of Jeremy Renner, it's making that part of his eye less round. It's a little more flat. With this person, if I knew who this was when I harvested the picture, I don't now. It's slightly curved, but maybe not quite as curved as it is up at the top. With her expression, she has her eyes closed, so it's kind of flattened that bottom lid so that it's not as curved, but the top one still is curved. So we're going to kind of apply that, and I'm going to, from just a little bit inside this dot. Oh, and your eye should be about half as tall, unless the person is squinting or have their eyes kind of closed. If that's just normal, open, and normal, like the rocks here, his is just a relaxed, not wide open, not squinted closed kind of face. Your eye will be about half as tall as it is wide. So we can use the same principle where we mark that halfway point, center it up, and get us an eye depth. But usually the lid is up higher on the top than it is the bottom, so it's not quite centered. So you can use that kind of as a guideline, but I typically, most of the time, I eyeball it. Did you see what I did there? Eyeball it. Okay, it's a little late for puns. And so I've made my football shape on the top. I've kind of flattened it so it looks kind of like a football that's a little bit squished. So I'm going to bring this in. You don't necessarily have to see the whole image, and that way I don't have to keep lifting it up to the camera. But you can see that. I wonder, let me turn the light off. Does that make it better to see? Maybe a little bit. And I tend to have my paper turned. Now, I forget to do this. I've been drawing faces a lot over the years, especially more recent years. But if you're right-handed, it's easier if you draw the left side first. If you're left-handed, it's easier if you draw the right side first. Because if you're right-handed and you draw the right one first, then when you go to draw the other one, if you don't have your paper tilted, it's covered up and you can't make them match. But if you tilt them, and that's how I get around the fact that I forget to do the opposite, the left first, since I'm right-handed. And so, but that's just a tip. If you're right-handed, draw the left one first. If you're left-handed, draw the right one first. So I've got my football kind of shapes, and that's really looking distorted in the camera. Does it need to be? No, I don't know how it needs to be tilted so it doesn't look like you're looking uphill. But that gives us the basic eye shape. Now, a couple things we need to do before we start working on the pupil and the iris is we need to put a little bit more space here for the eye, for the tear duct. And look at your model. Different people, their tear ducts are more or less noticeable. But you need some type of acknowledgement that there's a tear duct there. And also you've got the skin there at the edge of the tear duct. Another thing is the thickness of the lid. On some pictures and some models, it's harder to see, but you can see right here above his lower lashes, you can see the thickness of the skin there. So we're going to draw that. And it's a little bit thicker at the outer corner, and it gets thinner as you come in toward the inner corner. Sometimes, depending on how the person's head is tilted, sometimes you can see a little bit of the upper lid. I'm going to autofocus, see if I can get that a little bit clearer. Sometimes you can see a little bit, especially here at the corner. You might see just a little bit of the edge of that upper lid. But most of the time you're not seeing that because both the angle of the head and the lashes are covering it. But there are some, I had a picture of a model somewhere here where you could see part of it. I think this guy. And I don't know if it's able to see on the camera, but right in here you can see a little bit of that upper lid, but it's usually just barely. Okay. Now when we're drawing the iris and the pupil, we're going to start with the iris. If you draw where you see, and I'll use an eye shape over here. If you draw the pupil where you, or the iris, where you see the whole circle of the iris, your person is going to look scared. They're going to look frightened. Their eyes are going to look like they're wide and scared, and that's really not a good look on anybody. So we need part of that iris to disappear behind the lid. So you can see on him, we know that it's a circle, but part of that circle has disappeared behind his upper lid. On Zendaya, part of the iris has disappeared behind the upper lid. A little bit of it has disappeared behind the lower lid. This one of Jeremy Renner, a lot of his, almost equal amounts, are disappearing behind both upper and lower lids. Sometimes if a person is kind of looking up through their lashes and their head is tilted a little bit down, but they're looking up, you'll see the bottom edge of the iris, but that also means that you'll see less of the top. So here, even the pupil is even touching or about to go behind the lid. So you don't need it where you see all of the lid. I mean, you can tell with this, with just that dot there, it almost looks like this guy is petrified out of his mind. But we're going to fix that in a minute. We'll get that fixed with this right here. So on either side of this pupil, of this little dot, I'm going to create like a parentheses where part of the parentheses is going behind. That's kind of a big iris. Let's bring that in just a little bit. But it's going to be kind of a parentheses shape. If you have it disappearing behind the lower lid, just make sure you treat both eyes the same. And I'm putting this about halfway between that dot and the corner of the eye, maybe a little less than halfway, a little bit more toward the inner part. And you can see how now we're starting to get a little bit more of the look of the eye. I might need to bring this one in just a little. But I'm drawing so light so that when not if I have to erase, but when I have to erase, it's so much easier to. Now, the pupil should take up about half of the space in the eye. And so I get both of those put in. Now, before we color in the pupil, because the pupil is one of the 3 darkest areas of the face, but before we do that, we have to put a catch light in. And a catch light is this glimmer in the eye. We have that glimmer because of 2 things. Because of light that's reflecting off of our eyes. And the reason light reflects off of our eyes is because of tears, the moisture on our eyes. If our eyes are not wet, we won't have that catch light. They'll no longer be reflective. So if you don't put a catch light on your person may look a little bit dead, and that's not a good look on anybody. So we're going to make a little circle there. You want it to be in the same spot on each eye, and then we're going to color in everything on the eye. Now, this will be a good time if you have a 6B pencil to pull out your 6B. And you see there is the 6B, because this should be the darkest place on the face. And you can see how much darker the 6B makes it than just a regular pencil. So that gives us our pupil. Now, eyes have a texture to them. Let me see if one of my pictures of headshots over here is close enough that we can see the eye texture. Maybe him. Okay, here's a couple good examples. So we have these 2 eyes, and you can also look up eye close-up, Google eye close-up, and you can really get a good view of what an eye looks like. And now, talking about catchlight, the reason hers looks like this, I think this picture was taken outside, so you are seeing the sky, and that little dark area right there is most likely the photographer, because it's reflecting what it sees. It just happens if there's a really bright light there, like on his, you might see it as a dot. If you're inside where there are rectangular lights, like our fluorescent lights at school, that will actually have a rectangular shape to it. So I think she is outside, and you are seeing the reflection of the landscape she's facing, and that little darker area right there is the photographer. Isn't that cool? So, but you see, it looks almost like spokes going in toward the center. Everybody has a darker ring. Now, some people that have very, very light eyes, there may not be a whole lot of contrast between the ring and the rest, but most people, you'll have at least somewhat of a ring, or like on this gentleman, where the ring is really dark and just kind of fades into the rest of the iris. But we're going to create a look similar to that. And how we do that is we start at the edge of the ring, or at the edge of the pupil, and we make little flicks. So what I'm doing is I'm pressing so that, and then as I lift up my hand, as I do the stroke, so that it's wider at this end, and it fades as I move closer. So it's a little flick. Press and flick. And we'll use that flick on a lot of different things. We'll use it on these, what I call the spokes of the iris. It's actually, I think, an optical illusion in the eye, but it's an optical illusion we need to try to convey on paper. We also use it when doing eyelashes and eyebrows, and sometimes little baby hairs over by the side of the head. We use it a lot. But right now we'll use it to create this visual texture of the iris. And they're all going to come in toward the pupil, but they don't go all the way to the pupil. Are you able to see that? Now I try not to go outside that ring, because if I do, I'll have to erase it. Otherwise their eye may look bloodshot. And after I have several of these, and they're not perfectly straight, because the ones on eyes aren't perfectly straight. To me, it looks a lot like folded cloth, but it just gives that texture. So now we're also going to come from the pupil outward, and it just gives this feeling of this texture. And they're not perfect. They do move outward, but you're just trying to create texture. I'll do that very quickly over here, because it's always cool to be able to see the eyes both looking balanced and symmetrical. And I'm doing from the inward out. Now, after I get that done, I go in and I darken that ring. That also helps kind of cover up any areas if I accidentally went outside the area that I designated as being the ring. And we might even use a tortillon to help blend. I'll switch. We could use one of our darker pencils here to get that ring a little bit darker. And I have even used a tortillon to blend that ring inward a little bit, like it was on that one eye. So I'll do that real quick and just kind of smudge that inward. And it really gives the eye a feeling of just being real. Now, before we go on to the lashes, I do want to say that the eye is a sphere. So it's going to have some shadow on it. And let me find one that's a good example of that. Where is, okay, I think you can see it on the rock. Yeah, you can see that. His eyeball, it is a sphere. So just like spheres where we shade them as the surface is moving away from us, there is shading here at this edge, and there's shading here at this edge. So we're going to do that on both eyes. Also, the upper lid casts a shadow onto the surface of the eye. And sometimes the lower lid does it. It just depends on how the lighting is. So we're going to blend in a little bit of shadow here, not too dark. And you don't want to see lines there because then your person will look like they're bloodshot. So we want to stay really light, but we do want to give that sense of curving. And then we want to apply some shadow, not too dark, or else you'll make your person look like they have eyeliner on. But the upper lid does cast a shadow on the eye. So now I'm going to use my tortillon and kind of soften that a little bit. And I might have gone a little bit heavy-handed, so I'm just going to use my pencil, and I'm not going to pull, I'm going to tap. And that helps to be able to knock back some erasing, but without having harsh lines that you then have to try to fill in and blend out. So I'm just tapping with my eraser. And I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, now we need to draw the lid of the eye. And I'm going to pull in several examples that are different. Let's see. Let's do this guy. Oh, I'm going to have to back out so you can see these. Not too far so you can see the details. So we've got the rock, and you can see his lid very well defined. And it's a fairly wide lid that you're able to see. On Jeremy Renner, I'm gonna have to hold it up to the camera because there's only a tiny bit of lid because he has what they're called hooded lids. You can see a little bit right here. This guy also has that hooded lid, but you can see part of the lid there and part of the lid there, and then this that's coming over the lashes. This one is very even and smooth, and you see a nice lid there. On this one, it's quite thin. So everybody has different ones. On Henry Cavill, he's got one that's a little bit of a sideways lid happening there. So it's starting to have a little bit of a hood, but then you have, so if I was drawing his, I would draw the rounded curve here real lightly, and then I would cut across with this and erase the extra. But I was looking for someone that also has a very hooded lid is Ryan Reynolds. And I had a picture of him somewhere. I'm not sure where it has gone now. But his is, the hood on his eye is diagonal. And I'm not seeing it right now. So we'll just stick with these. So we're going to draw a lid. Also, if someone has Asian descent, they'll have the a fold here that comes across, sometimes even covering up the tear duct. So you just got to look at your model and see how to best represent what is real for them. So this is going to be, I'm not going to draw it really dark just yet. Sometimes we have to go in and darken it. If we go too dark with it too soon, it may end up looking like they have makeup on, even if they don't. So I've created a lid. Let me zoom back down. So here we've drawn the lid. Now, to start on lashes. Lashes, so many people will draw lashes. Let me get an eye here again. We'll just draw them straight out like this. That is not how lashes grow. Now the rock, his lashes were really fine and harder to see. Let me find my good example on my paper over here. there was a model over here that we could really see his lashes really good with. Well, here's one that we can see them quite well on. And this one, well, it doesn't show up as well on camera as this one does. But you see how they are curving. And even if hers are a little bit more on the straight side than some people, there's still a curve. There's still a bit of a curve, and they're coming off to the side. So you might have one or two lashes like right in here that may appear to go almost straight up before they start curving this way. But for the most part, it's better to have them with a curve. And the curve starts right at the edge of the lid. It tends to be straighter at the tip. So, there was a student earlier that if this was the top of the lid, they were starting out like this and curving them that way. We don't want to do it like that either. We want to start at the lid and curve and then swoop up. So, and you're going to go out to the side over on so like this is the tear duct. So this is the outer part of the eye. It's going to come out like this. And they're not parallel. If you look at her lashes, you'll see, now it's harder to see since she has mascara on, but they tend to go every kind of which way. And some of them will cross over, I mean, not completely, but one will cross over the other a little bit. Maybe you can see it on this eye of his. Oh yeah, there we're going really good. And we can see that some of them will angle a little bit more this way, but they're still curved and they're still basically going out to the side. It's better to get them drawn, and you can even swoop down in front of the eye. Sometimes you'll be able to see a shadow of the, let me see if I can move my pencil out of the way where you can see what I'm doing. And then I bring them curved up a little more upright as I move toward the center of the eye. And then, oh, I still need it this way for you, but it's harder for me to do I'm going to turn it sideways because it's harder for me to do my swoops. And the thing about it, turn your paper however you need to get the curl or the direction of movement that you need. So there, well, let's turn it back right. And we see that. I need to fix some of the direction of that. Now, if you're doing a guy, I probably wouldn't give him really long lashes, even though I've seen some guys that had much longer lashes than a girl that was wearing falsies. But with the limitations of graphite, if you give a guy really long lashes, it's probably going to make him look a lot more feminine. So we swoop them and bring them out to the side, but then bring them up more upright as we get toward the center, and then and lashes are longer out at the side and shorter as you come toward the center. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. Remember to make your lashes smaller as you come toward the center of the eye. I forgot to do that some over here. Then you can go back and fill in with some that aren't quite matching up with the others, just to get a more realistic look. And there we have the eyes. Now, a lot of times it's not uncommon for you to have a little bit of shadow here, and but you got to be careful about getting too much, or it'll look like they have black eyes. Somebody's punched them in the eye or the nose. You're also going to have shadow under the brow, male or female, but you'll have a lot more shadow with a guy. But let's talk about the brows, the eyebrows, because we need to talk about that in order to help your model look either as masculine or as feminine as you need it to. More times than not, now these two are both a little bit of an exaggeration on each type. More times than not, now there are exceptions to everything I say here, but more times than not, a feminine on a feminine face, you're going to have more space above the lid before you get to the brow. With a guy, it tends to, on a male, masculine face, it tends to sit lower. And if you notice, the start of this, where his brow starts here, is almost level with where his lid line is. With Jeremy Renner, same thing. His brow is almost below his where his lid is. With The Rock, his eyebrows are just sitting right there on that lid crease. On Henry Cavill, same thing. His are sitting right there, real low next to the eye. But then you see the female face, and there's a lot more space, a lot more arching there. Doesn't mean females have to have a lot more space. And some guys, you'll see a little more space here. Now, this is mostly because he has a very hooded lid, and that part of his eyelid is coming over his eye. But it's overall, it's still sitting much lower than what you see on most faces. See here, there's a lot more space there. So, and sometimes as artists, we exaggerate things to make them fit more, because we're dealing like with this, with graphite, and it hinders us in some ways. So let's talk about where to place the eyebrow. As far as alignment, you're going to align the eyebrow, like here is the tear duct. Some people, their eyebrow comes in just a little bit from the tear duct, and some people it comes out from the tear duct. So let's look at this one. See, this, I think this is a guy. His eyebrow comes in from the tear duct. Well, no, it's actually about level. Here, her eyebrow. You have a few fine hairs right here, level with the tear duct, but most of her eyebrow starts over here. So in general, look at the tear duct. So we're going to align with the tear duct. I'm going to draw a faint, very faint line up from my tear ducts. And then we're going to draw a diagonal line from our little nose place past the corner of the eye. And that line is where the eyebrow should come to. So we're going to do that on both sides. We're doing this very light because these lines will have to be erased, but that gives us a guideline. If this is a guy, you're going to bring the eyebrow lower to the lid, and it's not going to really start curving downward too much most of the time until you get toward the outer quarter of the eye, and then it turns down. With the girl, sometimes they come somewhat straight across, sometimes they arch a little bit. You really just have to look at your model. But more times than not, on a masculine brow, it's a lot straight. If it has a lot of arch to it, it usually means that they started really low. So where did this guy? He has a lot of arch in his eyebrow, but his eyebrow also starts quite low, almost level with his lid. But that arch is happening, the peak of the arch is over in this later part of the eye. So I don't want to encourage you to outline. If you need to, make sure it is the lightest lines you've ever drawn. A lot of times I will create just a line to follow, but when you're doing that little flick, it's so hard to do the upper one. But if you need to, I don't know if you can see how light I'm drawing this, but if you need to, and I'm drawing probably more of a feminine eyebrow here. I've kind of got the shape. Let's bring that a little bit thinner there at the end. There we go. So an eyebrow is like a comma that's been stretched out. And you see how light I've done that, because that line can't be there, or it can't be seen when we're finished, or else it looks like they just outlined their eyebrow with a eyebrow pencil, which isn't a good look on anybody. So we're going to, I need to mirror that over here. Let's see. I need to get I'm going to kind of give me a spot of where my arch gets to. So about right there. So, and it starts right here. So I'm creating this bottom line of the eyebrow. And if you do that top line, remember, make sure you do it super light so that you can cover over it with the eyebrow hairs that you draw. So I've kind of got my brows drawn in there. I'm going to go ahead and erase my guidelines because I don't want to the angle lines, because once I start drawing the hairs, I don't want to have to mess them up by erasing. And I might even tap back that top line because it's the one most likely to show and be a problem. But I can still see a little bit of it there. It's just barely there, and it can help guide me. Now, your eyelashes or eyebrow hairs that are here at the center are going to be almost straight up. Not quite, they lean just a little bit, but as you move further across, they're going to start leaning more and more, like the clock, the hands on a clock. As it moves around the clock, it starts leaning further down. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do the little flicks where we're pressing and then lifting up as we move our eyebrow, move our pencil. And you don't want to go in the same place all the time. And they don't have to be, they're not parallel. They're not like soldiers at attention. But as we move further down the eyebrow, we need to start having them lay over more and more. And by the time you get over here, they're going to start angling downward. Okay? Do the same thing over here. I'm doing the little flicks. This should not be a line that looks the same at the top of the line as what it does at the bottom. When you start, you want it to be firm and then flick so that you have a broader line here and a thinner line here. Remember, as we move across the eyebrow, doing these, they're going to start laying down more. If you need to tilt your paper to help you achieve that, then tilt your paper. Oh, I got too much of a turn to that. Let's try that again. That's looking a little better. Now, not all eyebrow hairs go in the same direction. I don't know. I don't think we can see it quite as clearly. And especially on guys. With guys, their eyebrow hairs have a tendency to start turning more quickly. You can see it on his. His they're still a little bit going straight up here, but then they start going sideways almost from the start. You can see up here at the top, there are hairs going sideways. So I usually will come in and very lightly do a few hairs that are, and that will also help to hide some of that line if you drew that line in. And even sometimes having some hairs angling downward from this top line. And it gives a much more natural look to the eyebrow. Oh, I forgot the lower lashes. I just realized that. The lower lashes have to come outside that thickness of the skin that we drew. And they will curve in the same way that these curve. These are coming sideways and out. These will do the same but down. They'll be longer at the outer edge and smaller. Of course, they're already quite small, but they'll get smaller toward the inner edge. And use your model as a guidance for this. And if you're wanting them to look masculine, you may not want to do quite as much lashes, or even have it being not much more than looking like dots. Let's see, where is now Chris Hemsworth? He's got quite a few lashes there. This gentleman has a few, but they're real subtle. Where did The Rock go? Let's look at his. They're very hard to see. You could almost just cover them as little tiny dots. So I think that covers, for the shading. But you can see how he's got shadow under his brow. So let's get back to On girls, you will shade right here around the lid, but this upper part here is really exposed to the light, so it won't get a lot of shadow. On a guy, you're going to shade right up to the brow and over to the side here. Go subtly, go very soft at first because you don't want it to look like he has eyeshadow. Now, you don't see much of a shadow across the nose here, but then you can see that his nose bridge is actually continuing all the way up into his forehead. So he has shadow here instead. On this gentleman, the shadow under his brow, it's really dark here and here, but there's even a bit of a shadow across here. And that's part of what indicates that that brow is very deep. On Chris Hemsworth, he has a shadow across the bridge of his nose. So that's one of the things that can really help accentuate the masculine look of your male model. You also will a lot of times will have a little bit of shadow here, whether male or female. If the female has makeup on, she may have tried to cover up that shadow a little bit. But this wraps up where we get to with the eyes. So I will see you next on the nose.